I adopted this practice of writing 25 ideas when I'm creating to give myself license to start. The reason I do that is because the alternative is to wait until I have the one good idea. And I find that daunting. And I think a lot of us do. A lot of us find it daunting when we have to wait for the magical one great, brilliant, genius idea.
Welcome to the Marketing for the Culture podcast, powered by the African American Marketing Association. Each week, we'll bring you an insightful conversation from some of the best experts in our industry on how to advance our career. Join the collective of Black marketers across the world advancing their brand as we work towards creating a collaborative community. All right, good people, welcome back to another episode of Marketing for the Culture. Today's special guest is Henry Adaso. Henry, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Michelle.
So we have a lot to talk about. Before we dive in, go ahead and tell the people a little bit about yourself.
I am an accidental marketer. I always thought I was going to be a publisher, and I was a kid in high school who used to make my own newsletter by hand and then annoy my friends to read the newsletter. And so I always had a passion for words, for the written word, and I didn't know I would end up using that skill set for marketing. But here I am today. I'm currently head of marketing for Cemex, and I'm also an author. And I've recently published my second book called The Gap, Navigating the Most Difficult Part of a Dream.
Yes, and we are definitely going to talk about that. I want to talk about your first book, Content Mapping, because I just think it's probably one of the best content strategy books, right? And I know there's a lot because there's the content, which is the written word, and then there's the content marketing and all that kind of stuff. So from your experience, what led you to writing Content Mapping?
It really came up as an idea because I didn't see any material published on the topic of mapping content to the buying cycle. And so there are lots and lots of great books on content marketing as a strategy, buyer personas, lots of great books on copywriting, the writing aspect of content. But I just thought that something as important as mapping content to the user journey is something that really needs to be treated with a lot of detail and a lot of respect. And so this is something that I felt could add value to the content marketing process. Really, it's about understanding the needs of your prospects and customers before you even interact with them, and then sort of meeting them at the point of their need. So it's almost like you're reading their mind.
So in this day and age, content is everywhere. So does everyone need to be a content creator?
God, no, because it is so crowded. You'll need a lot more resources, a lot more time, a lot more energy to stand out if everybody wants to compete in the arena of content. What we're finding adds a lot more value today is specificity. So narrowing your audience, narrowing your focus, and then serving them as well as you can, right? So back in the day, it was all about just whoever had the biggest brand, the biggest budget would win. But today, there's just so much information out there, right? And so how do you compete? You compete by hyper focusing on who you really want to serve and then serving them well.
So I know lots of times when we think about content creators, I think we're thinking about the fun people that are making videos and dancing and stuff like that. Do you think there's space for business content creators, business influencers? I don't think we call them that directly, but I think there's a niche for that.
Absolutely, there is space for business influencers and business content creators. The truth is we create content all the time. You and I are talking right now. We're literally creating content. When you have an idea in the shower, that's content, especially if you implement that idea. So we're constantly creating content. A podcast is a form of content. When you tell a story of a product that served you well, a service that you remember very well because it helped you solve a problem. That's content that's being passed on from one person to another. So I think when we boil it down to something as simple and as attainable as interactions and story, then we start to recognize the power in business content as well, right? And what are we talking about? We're really talking about you sharing expertise, ways that you've helped other customers, ways that you've helped people solve real problems. And in sharing that, not selling all the time, but really just telling the story, it resonates with other people who have the same problem, and they're more likely to remember you when they're ready to buy.
When they're ready to buy, right?
Yes.
So how do we create brand advocates with their content?
Brand advocates are incredibly valuable. The people that preach the gospel of the brands to other people, those are the ones that will bring you qualified conversions that will drive your business. So it's really about nurturing them, right? How do we congratulate them for being part of our brand? You know, maybe you have a loyalty program that you can promote to reward them, really, right? To say, hey, thank you for trusting us with your business. You know, a lot of times in business, we make the mistake of trying to go after new customers. But all of the research has shown us that it can cost anywhere between 5 and 15% more, or maybe even higher, depending on your business, to gain a new customer than it is to maintain an existing one. So if you think about the benefits of creating brand advocates, one, it's cheaper for you. Two, they're more likely to be credible because they've used the product that they're talking about, right? So all of those people that leave Yelp reviews, Google Business Reviews, those are potential brand advocates. And what we have to do to create more of them is to treat every interaction as if it's art, right? And what is the purpose of art? Well, the purpose of art is to stop time. So how do we stop time for the people that we're serving? How do we make them stop and go, wow, that was so helpful. That added so much value to my life. In fact, I want to tell somebody about it. When we deliver value in such a way that people feel compelled to talk to other people about it, that's how we create brand advocates.
I love it. I want to pivot a little bit and go into the gap. Now, was it even a year between you writing these two books?
They both came out the same year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know you personally. I know you're rocking and rolling career-wise, right? So what was the inspiration behind the gap?
The gap was this book idea haunted me for months. It was something that I just could not put down. And it really originated from the first book. So I published and launched Content Mapping January of 2021. And shortly after that book was launched, it received a lot of support from the community and in ways that really surprised me. And part of the feedback that I received was from people that wanted to publish their own books, that had dreams that they were chasing, things that they wanted to put out in the world, but they weren't sure how to go about it, you know, how to get started. And some were already on that journey, but they didn't know how to keep going, right? And so I wanted to write a book about that process, the process of trusting the process, because that's what it took to write that first book, was really just trusting the process, overcoming the fear, doubt, the anxieties that usually come with the process. So I wanted to write a book that could help more of us trust ourselves enough to trust the process.
I know when I was reading the book on the plane, it was like, it was your voice in one ear and it was Seth Godin's voice in the other ear. And particularly his book, The Dip, and you had a chance to reach out to him. So we want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a huge compliment. So Seth Godin to me is one of the greatest thinkers of our generation. And he's someone who I admire and respect a lot. And I think he gives voice to some of my deepest sensibilities about how I think the world should look and how I want to show up in the world. So it's someone that I truly respect. And I simply asked him to read the book, and didn't know if he would be able to. I mean, he's a very busy person, and I was lucky enough that he liked the book enough to endorse it. So that made me cry. That was a huge, 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 huge blessing to have his endorsement. Really grateful.
Shoot your shot. All right.
Yeah, you have to shoot your shot, right? And you know, the funny thing is, I was in my own gap, right? With that process, I was thinking about, you know, what if he laughs at me, and what if he says no, right? But I asked, and luckily it worked out.
I love it. All right. So with the gap, you mentioned two numbers specifically, the first 25 and the first 100. And you mentioned 100 a couple of different times, but how do we get to the first 25 and the first 100?
The idea of the first 25 is a tool, right? It's a mental tool that I developed when I was working for a marketing agency all those years ago. And I was in the middle of writing copy. I was a content specialist early on in my career. So I was in the middle of writing copy, and I was really struggling to come up with good ideas. And so what I would do was I would just write all of the bad ideas that I had in mind. And in writing out all of the bad ideas, I would find that I had the momentum to keep going. And eventually I may get to idea number 18, 19, or 20, and something usable comes up. So I adopted this practice of writing 25 ideas when I'm creating, to give myself license to start. The reason I do that is because the alternative is to wait until I have the one good idea. And I find that daunting. And I think a lot of us do. A lot of us find it daunting when we have to wait for the magical one great, brilliant, genius idea. Most of us just don't have that. You know, if you're the type to create that first idea and have it be genius, you know, more power to you. But for the rest of us, the question is, how do we give ourselves license to begin? And one of the ways that I do that is by creating 25 ideas. And then the first 100, you know, again, this is about iterating until you get to something that is usable, right? So maybe for you, it's not 25, maybe it's 100 ideas. Maybe you need to create 100 ideas, but you have to keep going until you get to something good. And the magic of the process is that you can't get to the good idea until you begin. And so how do you begin? Give yourself license to create some bad ideas. Give yourself license to work out all of the experimentation until you get to something that is really magical.
Are you familiar with James Altucher?
Yes.
So it's been a while, but I remember he would advise, like, kind of keep like an idea journal and just every day write your ideas down. And some ideas you'll execute yourself, and some ideas you'll just give away to people within your network based off of conversation. And I found myself doing that a lot. And I'm like, I'm definitely an ideas person. I never run out of ideas, but I do need to write them down.
But let me turn the tables and ask you this: have you used any of the ideas from your idea journal?
Yes. Right. So a recent one last year, I asked my assistant to find me, I think I said like 10 to 20 questions, because I wanted to create a DEI quiz for my website, like something engaging or whatever. And from that, I actually created my card game, which is in process, right? So it went from, we'll just say 20 questions to 150 questions. And I just had to narrow it down to the top 100. So that's a product in process right now.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah. And then that's only possible because you documented and cataloged some ideas, and then you went back and picked one. That's great.
Yeah. All right.
It works.
Huh?
It works.
Do you consider yourself ambitious?
I am ambitious. I would say yes, guilty as charged.
So I think we assume someone that's ambitious, they're goal oriented, right? But how do we create better goals? Because I'm like, I want to make $1 million. I want to write a book.
And I think most of us approach goal setting the same way. We think, in pop culture, we hear all the time how much we need to hustle and how we can become a millionaire in 30 days. And I think that can put the pressure on us to focus on results oriented goals. And so that's what most of us create. The problem with that is half the time you don't control a lot of the factors that create the results. And I think a more sustainable way to set goals is to focus on process oriented goals. And what I mean by that is, instead of saying, I am going to become a best-selling author, right, in 6 months, which is a result-oriented goal, and which depends on so many other factors. Let's say specifically, if you want to become a New York Times bestseller, there's so many factors. There's it's subjective. There's editorial review and certain sales you have to meet. So there's so many things that need to line up for you to reach that goal. Some of them you can influence for sure, but some of them you can't. And so that to me is a result-oriented goal, which often leads to heartbreak. A process-oriented version of that would be to say that I am going to create the best possible book I can create on this topic, and I will give it every chance I can to reach as many people as need to receive this book. Now, this focuses you on the process itself. And so you start thinking about the outline and the draft, the manuscript, and the team that you need to work with, the editorial process you need to follow. Those are all processes that can help you create this product that you're really proud of. And if we're lucky, we gain traction from that.
With content creation, social media, technology, do you think Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours still applies?
I think it's a good number to think about, right, when we're trying to attain mastery. But I think there's a lot in what he was saying that is not as easily boiled down to nuggets and to sound bites that maybe got lost a little bit. And the key one that I want to highlight and that I also touch on in the book is deliberate practice, because the 10,000 hour rule is based on deliberate practice. So it's not just putting in 10,000 hours learning a skill, it's about how you learn the skill. And a lot of the success comes from deliberate practice and from getting good feedback and getting coaching, from focusing on that skill. Another element that I touch on in the book that I think is also important when we're trying to attain mastery is this idea of myelin. So myelin is it's something that's it's kind of emerged in this new frontier of the personal development as being critical, right? So if you think of it like a kind of a coat of wires, you have your wires running through your electronic devices, and they're naked wires. And if they're naked, it can draw current from anything that's nearby. But if they're coated, they're more concentrated, right? So think of skill development in the same way as being something that needs to be concentrated and it needs to be focused in order for it to grow, right? And so if we take the approach of drilling our skill the way that athletes do, where they run the same drill over and over until they get better at it, that's one of the ways that we can gain mastery, is really by focusing and practicing, but with intention.
I love it. What do you want people to take away from the gap?
That anything worth doing at all, whether it's writing a book launching a business, meeting a personal financial goal, developing a new career path, anything at all that's worth doing has a gap. And where there's a gap, there's probably a way. And it starts with trusting ourselves. It starts with developing a process. It starts with not relying solely on motivation, because that ultimately runs out and we're not motivated all the time. It's relying on a process. It's relying on a system that demands that we show up every day and do a little at a time until we get to where we want to be.
Is that thing called discipline?
Commitment. It's commitment. It's focus. It's shutting off some of the noise that the world is throwing at us for the moment that we need to be focused, and drilling our skill, focusing on the goal until we get to where we want to be.
Yeah, I love it. Where can people find you and your books?
Book is available on Amazon. It's available in an ebook format as well as paperback. And I am online everywhere as Henry Adaso, and also at henryadaso.com.
I love it. Henry, thank you so much for being a guest of Marketing for the Culture. As always, peace and blessings, everyone.
Thank you for having me, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Marketing for the Culture podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe, whether it's on Apple, Google, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. And of course, our videos are on YouTube. If you have a moment, feel free to give us a rate, review, or just comment. We appreciate our sponsors for their continuous support. Also, if you're interested in learning more about our sponsors or becoming a member of the African American Marketing Association, visit aa-ma.org.